Hello and welcome to the Jackcast, your Swansea City podcast. I'm Matt Brocco. I'm joined as ever by Steve Carroll. Evening, Steve.
Evening.
It's evening, this afternoon, isn't it? And we're delighted to welcome back to the pod regular guest of ours now, Ian Mitchelmore. Afternoon, Ian.
Yeah, afternoon, Matt. Afternoon, Steve. How you doing, boys?
Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, mate.
No, pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Always a joy.
We've got a few things to talk about. We've got the Ipswich game for the Swans, but we're going to start off with the most recent, I think, Steve, because it's probably the biggest bit in the news at the moment, which is Wales's qualifying campaign for Euro 2024. It came to, well, I say, not really an end, a crossroads last night, didn't it? They could have qualified had things gone their way, but a combination of one of the worst refereeing displays we've seen, well, in about 2 weeks, to be honest, if you include this Sunderland game.
Yeah, refs, eh? Can't have a game without them. We wonder sometimes, don't you, if we could just have an automated system or something, because my God, that one last night. But yeah, I think we've got to be realistic about it. As annoying and bad as the ref was, obviously it didn't cost Wales in the end, did it? Croatia did their job, beating Armenia at home, as I think everybody expected them to. I mean, I looked at the stats and Armenia had 2 shots. I think Croatia had 700 plus passes. So there was, realistically, I don't think there was ever going to be any other result really there. We were asking for a bit of a miracle. So obviously a win last night wouldn't have been enough. We started quite well though. We had some good chances, scored a really good goal. And I think obviously we may well have doubled our lead if the referee and VAR had been paying any sort of attention, because I think we probably should have had 2 penalties. Should have had a free kick on the edge of the box that wasn't given as well. And then Turkey had the worst penalty shout of the lot and it got given, and obviously they've equalised from it. So, yeah, a frustrated night, really. I think we weren't as good in the second half as the first, but, I mean, look, it's one of them. It feels a little bit pointless in some ways to get too annoyed about the referee, because obviously it didn't cost us. I think the sickening bit would have been if we'd gone to Armenia and won, which we didn't do, and we didn't deserve to do, if we're going to be honest about it, because we weren't good enough on the night to get the 3 points. And I think if we'd won that and then that Turkey game last night, obviously the penalty had cost us, we would be raging, because obviously it would have been very unjust. But look, at the end of the day, we weren't good enough to qualify through the group. We've only had 3 wins in 8 games. 2 of them were against Latvia. You can't realistically argue about it. I mean, I was looking at some of the groups earlier and what we've had previously, and I think usually what you need to get top 2 is either 5 wins, a draw, and 2 defeats, or you need 4 wins, 3 draws, and 1 loss. That's usually enough. I mean, we got a bit lucky in 2020 where we had 4 wins, 2 draws, and 2 losses. So, yeah, I think in that case, you're a bit lucky. I think someone has qualified with that record this time. But in general, that doesn't end up being enough. Obviously, Ukraine and Italy, they ended both on 14, didn't they? And obviously one went through and one didn't. So, yeah, I think even if we'd won last night, it wouldn't have been enough. And I think you can't really argue we would have been a result short. And as it stands now, because we didn't win last night, we're 2 results short. So you can't complain about it. But the good thing is we're not completely out of it. We do have a playoff, but how that will pan out, I don't know. But yeah, as you said at the start, not a good refereeing display, was it?
No, to be honest with you, what I don't understand, you mentioned Ukraine and Italy there, is, I don't know if you saw that game, Mitch, but the Mudryk penalty shout in the 94th minute there to what would have sent Ukraine through.
Thank God it didn't.
Well, was on the point.
I was going to say.
No, that wouldn't have helped Wales at all to play against Italy. But the idea that they've got VAR in these games, I just don't get it, because they're not. That's a clear penalty, an absolute stonewall. And if you're not there to help the ref out, which is what they told us, that's what it was for, not to overrun the game, not to re-ref the game. But if the ref has clearly not seen something he should have seen, or he would have awarded had he seen, then you help him out and you say, actually, have a look at this. But the same with Wales last night. He could have looked back at the Ben Davies one and gone, hang on, ref, have another look at this, because there's barely anything. It's a shoulder touch, Is there any real need to give a penalty there in such a big decision? And then not to go back to the Brennan Johnson ones in the first half. You have to wonder. You have to wonder what VAR is playing at, because we see in the Premier League and being overbearing, well, it's completely the opposite here, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, what do you think, Mitch? I mean, obviously you were watching the game last night as well. I'm assuming you're thinking along similar lines.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the big frustration for me with VAR, it's the process, and watching the Swans every week. Luckily, you don't have to be put through it. I've been at Premier League games and international, and it just ruins the experience. It's really, really horrible. And don't get me wrong, you get the decisions that go your way sometimes. I remember when, I think the first one I actually did live was when Switzerland scored their second goal against us in the Euros in Baku, and it got disallowed, and obviously we got a draw, so it was fantastic. And I think that was my first experience as a reporter in a live stadium where there was VAR. But it's just the process that it's working to is really irritating. It infuriates me at the moment. But in terms of last night, the Wales-Turkey game, the biggest frustration for me was sod VAR. It's a bad refereeing performance. He's given that decision, the foul on Ben Davis. He thinks that's a penalty. Yeah. Now that's just a dreadful. You don't need VAR to say he should not be making that decision. That's my problem. It's a dreadful refereeing call. And then to see Brennan Johnson get clearly just bundled over, and for him not to say that that's a penalty. Don't get me wrong, VAR should intervene, because we always hear the words clear and obvious, and that they were clear and obvious. But first and foremost, the ref's got to get the calls right. Yes, he's going to make mistakes, but they're just abysmal refereeing calls first and foremost. So we can talk about VAR all we want. It was just an awful refereeing performance first and foremost, wasn't it?
Rob Page wouldn't say as much last night, at least immediately after the game, Mitch. But I've been winding Steve up before we started recording by showing him where the ref was from, which is Slovenia, which shares a massive border with Croatia, who could have done with a helping hand from the ref last night, and it looks like that's what they got.
Yeah, I think you understand it. Page was absolutely livid, and a couple of the players did nick zone. I think Jordan James was one of the ones who sort of really stuck the boot in, and I think he maybe sort of bit his tongue afterwards. He realised he might have overcrossed the mark a little bit, but you understand their frustration, because at the end of the day, I thought certainly first half last night, Wales played really well, deserved to be in front. Second half weren't as good. I think the energy was disappeared really, and we don't have those sort of squad depth to change it in the ways that maybe we did when you had your Bales and Ramseys and fully fit. But still, you shouldn't be losing that game when you're 1-0 up and you lose to a rubbish decision really. So I get their frustration, and like Steve's already said, it didn't cost us, thankfully. That's the one thing. But I do feel for them, because you want to end the campaign on a high and go into the March playoffs, whereas now it's another 2 games where we've not managed to pick up a win after what was a fantastic win against Croatia. So,
you know what I don't get, and we're obviously going to talk about this probably now. It's probably a good time to talk about it. Dan James comes on with 5 minutes to go. We desperately need to win this game. Obviously the players on the pitch, Rob Page will probably know how Croatia's going, but he's still relying. Could get a last-minute equaliser from Armenia. Things could help. He brings on Dan James, takes off Harry Wilson. Now, I'm not saying that Harry Wilson was his whole glittering best or anything like that, but you got 5 defenders on the pitch. You roll the dice, Steve, no? You take the chance. And Rob Page has got to come under some scrutiny here.
I think the really strange one for me was in Armenia, where obviously we really needed to force the issue.
Yeah.
And he did the same thing, really. And I was looking at it, I think, well, Mepham's on a bucket here, just with half an hour to go. We've got to go. We have to go for it, yeah? It's must win. I couldn't emphasise enough how much of a must win it was. And obviously it's been proven that it was, because, it was way too late then last night, wasn't it? So, you've got to... I did understand why in that game, for example, he went with a 5 at the back, and if anything, I was quite pleased that he left 1 or 2 on the bench, because we'd done well against Croatia.
Yeah.
And I did think it made sense to certainly start that way and then maybe later on to go for it. But, yeah, I think you've got to sometimes be a bit more... You have to risk more, don't you, sometimes in certain games. And I think... I think the thing I really didn't get along with that is Dan James came on quite late, didn't he?
Last night,
yeah.
It was like 85, 86 or something.
It was more about 78, I think. But then 5 minutes later, Kiefer Moore comes on. I'm thinking, well, he's got even less time now. Why not bring them both on together? And I don't think either of you will know this because you weren't at the game. But when Kiefer came on, I think it was for Nico Williams, wasn't it? I think it was David Brooks and Brennan Johnson were gesturing to the bench to say, what are we doing? What's the plan? Who now goes where? What formation are we playing?
Yeah.
And you're thinking, well, surely we've talked about this, haven't we? In the build-up that if we need a goal, we might go down this route of a 4-4-2 and certain players will play in certain positions. But the fact they were gesturing suggested to me that they didn't really know what we were doing. And I think that is a problem. I mean, But Page has taken a lot of stick. He did the Croatia game. We seemed to have a good plan and we did well. But, I mean, the issue is no one really believes in him today. I mean, you're looking at the Turkey manager, Vincenzo Montella. I mean, he's managed, a couple of hundred games at Serie A level, I think, isn't he? Our manager has managed at League Two level without great success. Now, that is the difference. Like, it might sound harsh, but it's a fact. I mean, I'm not sure what the credentials of the Croatia manager is, but I'm assuming he's managed at a couple of tournaments previously and stuff like that. But, I mean, this is the big weakness that we've got. I mean, look, we're not as good as we were, without a doubt. We are missing those star players that we've had previously, but we haven't got a bad side. And we've got a little bit of depth. I wouldn't say we've got great depth, but we had a couple of players on the bench last night that you felt could come on and obviously do a job for us. So, but what we really need is a better manager to obviously have a proper plan and to get the best out of what we got. And I don't think Page has done that really for quite a while. But there's a problem now, isn't there? I mean, Mitch, do you think he could lose his job? This is the question before the playoffs. I mean, it'd be a big call to do it now, wouldn't it? Because obviously the next manager's only going to get 3 or 4 days before what potentially could be the 2 biggest games, or certainly one if we get through of a new manager's tenure at the start.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we sort of briefly touched upon it before we started recording, but the logical time would have been after those 2 games to Turkey and Armenia in the summer, wouldn't it? Because it would have given a new manager couple of games to sort of bed in, a few separate 3 camps it would have been in total, wouldn't it? September, October and this month. Then, had it still been playoffs, at least they could have had, a bit more time to prepare for that then again. But, for whatever reason, that they stuck by him and that was their choice. Well, it might not have been Noel Mooney's choice, but it did happen anyway. So, but yeah, in terms of could he be sacked? Well, yeah, absolutely, because we failed in the qualifying campaign. So that discussion will be had, and I'm sure that's going to happen very soon with Noel Mooney, Steve Williams, and Rob Page. They'll get together again like they always do after camps. But do I think he'll go? No, I think they'll stick by him because, like you just said there, Steve, it's you straight into the next block of games. It's just not the right time to change, and a new manager would literally get 3 or 4 days to work with the players, and then he'd be straight into a semi-final. So, yeah, I think if it doesn't pan out as we hope in the playoffs, then that's probably when you'd be looking at it, because then would it be Nations League and then World Cup qualifiers after that. So there's more of a gap then. So then you got to remember about finances as well. They don't want to be paying off managers and going down that route because funds are really tight at the moment at the FAW, and not qualifying for the Euros will only make things worse in that regard. So that's a long way of saying I don't think he'll go. Sorry, by the way, I waffled a bit.
No, that's fine. I do find it baffling with the FAW. I've got to be honest that the finances are not great. You think we made a lot of money from getting to the World Cup, and there has been this talk that finances are not good. It just baffles me really. But I mean, I think the FAW, from my point of view, have backed themselves into a corner here. It's very difficult to change the manager now, and I just think if we don't qualify, like regardless of what they do, I think they are going to take the brunt of the blame, and I think they deserve to more than the manager even, because as I've said, they had that chance in the summer to make that change. A new manager would have had 3 camps to bed in, and then knowing that he would have a playoff and that you'd be building towards that, and that would be fine. Whereas now, if you stick with Page, it'll be you should have gone sooner, which is understandable. You should have. Or it'll be if you bring a new manager in, you brought in a new manager in, and they've had a matter of days to work on something, and it's like a gamble that's backfired. So I think Mooney's position could be under threat, certainly from a fan point of view. Anyway, I think that he's probably lost some support already, but I do wonder if people will want him out. But I mean,
he's hung his hat on this decision, isn't he? Massively. When he's had lots of things.
Even though it does sound as if the speculation was that he might want him out, but yeah. It's not entirely his decision. But unfortunately, I think that the problem is with this sometimes you've just got to. There was a lot of speculation before the Croatia game, and I was thinking this is a bit harsher because we've just beaten Latvia. And we've got Croatia, we expect to lose. And if you sack him after that, though, but nothing had changed since the summer, is it? We'd beaten the team we'd expect to beat previously. Yeah. So you just make the decision at the sensible time, which was the summer. But then obviously you beat Croatia, and then you can't sack him then because, the players have come out and defended him and they've put in a really good performance. And you've just, it's like indecisive, isn't it? You've got to sometimes just make a decision, I think, and end all speculation. But they didn't do that in the summer, and then it almost felt like the speculation was worse in the autumn time when the season started than in the summer. So the whole thing's baffling, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Sorry, go on, Matt.
No, you jump. I was going to move it on. Go on. You say what you were going to say.
Yeah, no, like you were just saying there, so they had a logical time to do it. They didn't, and you've got to re-put your so whatever comes from that. Because if we do qualify, let's be honest, we've still got a chance. Then they'll say fair play. They've backed a man who's also taken us to Euros and to a World Cup as well. So yes, we had Bale, yes, we had Ramsey in peak form and stuff as well. But at the end of the day, he will feel he's got the support of the dressing room, and they showed it in that Croatia game where, in the summer, it was just two dreadful performances and we made a lot of mistakes, as players as well. Page received a lot of criticism, rightly so. But yeah, even in Armenia the other day, I don't think that was entirely on Page either. There was about 6 or 7 players who were nowhere near what they should be doing. Nico Williams hitting a man right in front of him with a cross where he's got 10 yards of space, and the ball bouncing off Kiefer Moore, and Ethan Ampadu couldn't play a little layoff to Brennan. Really, really basic stuff. So, players have to look at themselves as well, because we can't keep saying we're in transition and we haven't got Bale anymore. Well, yes, we've known this for a long time now. It's been nearly a year since he's retired, or it's been a year this month or this week even since he last played for us. So, it's not new. So there's a lot on the players as well, I think, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that have got to go out and perform and take over from your Bales and Joe Allens and them boys these days, aren't they?
Consistency's been a real issue, isn't it? You have one game where you think, oh, hang on, and that's when he goes and sticks with the same 11. Yeah, and then you think, well, where was that performance gone?
Well, there's I think throughout his reign, really, there's been the odd exception of a good performance. I remember, for example, a couple of years ago, we went to Prague, Czech Republic, and we played really well. We drew 2-2, but I thought we should have won.
Should have won, yeah, it was excellent.
Yeah, we played really well, didn't we? And I remember then in Estonia, a couple of days later, we ran a couple of pints, I think. But then the game came, and we did win, but we were bloody awful. And I was thinking, where's the performance gone from literally a few days ago when we were playing against a nation that was far better, and now we've played a lot worse? It's just, I think that's the frustration, really.
We are finding that we're playing a little bit up in our game, a little bit against the bigger. Yeah,
I do wonder as well sometimes, are we actually better against the teams we're not so sure we're going to beat? Like, because you'd argue Armenia, before a ball was kicked, we certainly expected 4 points, maybe 6, and we've done terribly. And I think against Croatia, I know we were outplayed over there, nicked the draw. We were a bit lucky, to say the least. But obviously we played well against them at home. We didn't play badly last night. So maybe we're better in those games. As I say, that example of Czech Republic away, where we played really well. So maybe those games maybe they suit us better. I don't know. I mean, there is a discussion about Ramsey, I think. Does he, would we have beaten Croatia if he'd played? Not that I'm saying he's, on ability he shouldn't play, but obviously
because the team was a lot more dynamic in that game, a lot more fluid.
Yeah, what's your make of that, Mitch? This Ramsey debate. Obviously, if he's fit, he's going to play, isn't he? But
yeah,
might be better without him in some games, or
it sounds like a mad debate because he's one of the best players of our generation, and still is in my opinion. I still think he's up there. He's had a great season at Cardiff, in fairness, when he's been fit. And for me, if he's fit, he plays. Simple as that. I don't think it's. I was going to say I don't think it's a debate. We're having a debate right now, but I know what you mean in terms of there was a good balance. But I found when he's played deeper, it hasn't worked. And if we've had maybe Harry Wilson and Ampadu, but now that we've got a proper midfield setup with Ampadu and Jordan James, by the way, what a play! He's having
he's filled a big void, I think, hasn't he?
Massively. Yeah, he's been brilliant since he's come in. So I think that gives a player like Ramsey more license now to do what he's best at doing, and he doesn't have to worry about the defensive side. And we saw it at the World Cup where he just looked lost, and yet his running stats and everything, I think he was the best of any Wales player in that tournament. And yet you look at him, what he contributed, and it was, he wasn't the only one, in fairness, but it just didn't work for him. And I think that's because we just never really managed to get that midfield dynamic, because obviously we were missing Joe Allen at the time as well. So but yeah, when he's fit, he plays for me. I think you don't have to worry about that midfield issue anymore, and just what he gives you in the final third that we don't, DJ, Brennan Johnson, not so much Kiefer Moore, but these attacking Harry Wilson before Croatia. We weren't getting enough goals and assists from these players. David Brooks as well. Granted, I know he had his own situation with the cancer and stuff, so for him to even be playing is incredible, but. When you got Bale, there was always goals, there was always assists. Same with Ramsey, but the other players we don't get enough of that. I think Nathan Blake said it on Radio Wales last night in terms of, it was Ewan Roberts. It was sort of questioning the contributions of these players over a number of years. So yeah, Ramsey's a guy who does that. So for me, he does play.
I think one issue we have got, I was thinking about this last night, is like, I almost feel like it's like we've gained 2 points in this group from long throws, haven't we? I think there was the one in Croatia and the one in Armenia. And you think that really shows that we're not doing a lot. And the other thing we've got, I suppose, is we have got Harry Wilson with a free kick. So I know he hasn't scored one in this campaign, but I wonder if that's a way where we can score. But it just feels like we're out of ideas in a lot of ways because we just haven't done a lot.
Yeah, and that comes back to why I think Ramsey's got to play, because he's the kind of guy that can, set something up or play that final third pass that the other players don't really do. So
yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. He'll play, will he? Obviously, if he is fit. I think more what I'm thinking in some ways is, are you better off having him for half an hour at the end as opposed to him playing an hour, if that makes sense, because you can just sort of keep yourselves in shape and then bring him on to maybe try and win the game. I don't know. But the tricky issue is obviously, look, if he was 100% fit and he could run for 90 minutes, he's in the team, isn't he? Yeah, but the question with him is, especially in these playoffs now, say that we win the first one, we get another one, can he play 90 minutes twice?
Well, that's the key question, isn't it? This camp was the first one since the summer. I think that we had 2 competitive games in the same camp, because all the others we'd had the friendly in between. So we were able to sort of prep for one big game, and we played pretty well out in Latvia, should have been more comfortable, played brilliantly against Croatia at home. And in this camp, I just thought we just ran out of energy in Armenia, and same in the second half against Turkey last night. So we could have this exact same issue if we do manage to get through into the final next March. Do we hit burnout again? And like we touched upon the squad, do you have to sort of change things up in terms of maybe be careful with Ramsey and them sort of boys?
Yeah, you think so? At least there is. I think it's a Thursday and a Tuesday, isn't it? As opposed to, the usual of there's 2 extra days turnaround. Yeah, that'll be a bit of a help, wouldn't it? I mean, what are we thinking in terms of what we want? I mean, from my point of view, we definitely don't want Ukraine. I mean, for everyone that's listening, the draw's probably been made by the time you listen to this, but we can either have Ukraine, Iceland, or Finland, can't we? And I mean, from my point of view, Iceland are the weakest, I would probably think. Then Finland, and I think there's a reasonable gap then to facing Ukraine, who, from my point of view, we certainly don't want to face. And then,
but then we were just talking about how Wales up their games against the better ones, isn't it? It's very hard, isn't it?
I think there's like a balance here, because I do wonder if Iceland could be very cautious and it could be tricky. But their record's tricky in poor though in recent years. But they do have obviously a free kick taker that's very good and is now back on the scene.
Is he still back? Is he playing back in them again?
I think he is. Yes.
Oh, okay.
So that would make things tricky, I think, for us potentially. Don't think Finland are brilliant, but they'd probably come and have more of a go with us. But then, like I say, I don't want. Let's be honest about it. We robbed Ukraine. They were a lot better than us.
Oh yeah. But the whole world thought we robbed Ukraine because of the circumstances.
Well, we got our karma because we were terrible at the World Cup. But you've got to think the same. And the Ukraine, that's the team we want to avoid, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I think I probably would go for Iceland, but I think either Iceland or Finland you'd look at as probably being a bit more preferable. But you look at Ukraine as a team; they're just really well drilled. I like them, and they've got a lot of individual talent as well. So, they remind me of the sort of how Wales were in that sort of 2016 era, where we were just really good. A lot of good sort of Premier League, Championship players, but we had some stars in there as well. You're looking at some of the ones that they've got, and like we've been talking about the refereeing situations. I mean, for me, they had a Stonewall penalty not given against us last year as well, and committed a foul. They had a Mudryk the penalty the other night that should have been given, and so maybe that'll come against us next year.
Yeah, you do think last time we were a little bit lucky, to say the least. I mean, wherever it's called, Austria at home and then Ukraine at home. I mean, you could have had Italy or Portugal. Obviously, you could have been away. The games were spaced out. I don't think Bale or Ramsey would have been great in the final if it was a few days later. So it did feel a bit like everything went for us, really, didn't it? So,
it did, yeah.
We'll soon find out. I mean,
right? It just came into my mind a few minutes ago, and it's a long way away for now. But if Wales were to qualify via the playoffs, would you sack Rob Page then?
That would be incredibly harsh, wouldn't it?
What do you mean? Like, if you didn't have the Nations League playoff, then you would be looking at a failed Euro campaign year, and we just not be going. So this could be something.
He's not the right man. I think that's obvious. But I mean, that's not going to happen, is it? I mean, the truth is, if we do qualify, he could be safe for a long time, because no one's going to expect the World Cup qualifying. No one's going to think we'll reach that. So he's 16 places compared to 24. It will be hard. And we may well be a third seed now because we've not done great in this group.
Yeah.
So it'll make it even harder again. And obviously 2028, there's a fair chance we won't have to qualify. So then if you don't do badly in a World Cup group, even if you don't qualify, in theory, you could be safe, I think. But I mean, we know that the chief exec, as far as we're aware, isn't too keen on him. So who knows what's going to happen is the honest thing. But I think if we qualify, he's not getting sacked. I'd be absolutely amazed if that happened. Wales haven't sacked someone since the mid-90s. So they're not going to sack someone for qualifying.
I mean, we can start a campaign.
Well, I think people have been on the case to boot this bloke out for months on end, but arguably over a year. But he's still there.
He is, and he's... I think we were talking before we started recording about him batting away the question with a one-word answer last night on his future.
Yeah. Well, look, he's not going to stand down, is he? He knows he's not going to get a job as good as this again. I mean, my dream remains that Cardiff City come in and kill two birds with one stone. But, I thought that might happen at one point, but I don't think it will now. So, well, look, I think he'll be there for the playoffs, and then depends how we do, doesn't it? I think if it goes badly, he could be out. But if it doesn't, then he'll be there. He'll take the tournament, and I'm assuming he will lead us into World Cup qualifying.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you feel like an opportunity has been missed some months ago, didn't you, where we could have made the change now and then built for the future. But it does feel like we're treading water a little bit now, doesn't it? And seeing, if we went to Germany, is it going to be a similar situation to Qatar, where we just kind of stumble and fall at the first hurdle?
I think we're not going to do much in Germany, I don't think. The only thing is, of course, because of the format, one win does sometimes mean, doesn't it, that you get through to the next stage, and then, like, I'd be amazed.
Now, can't you? And sometimes,
yeah, that's the thing. I mean, Northern Ireland, did they beat Ukraine maybe in Euro 2016? And then obviously we faced them, didn't we, in the last 16? They certainly beat somebody in it to get through. So, I mean, it can happen. I mean, it's not impossible, is it? Like, I'd say if it was like a two teams go through group, then it'd be very unlikely that we would progress. But I mean, once you're there, I mean, you don't know. So many things come into it, doesn't it? The fitness of players, the form of players. Sometimes you just peak at the right time. I mean, I know Wales did superbly in 2016, but we were never a top four in Europe side realistically, were we? We just, just a few things went for us. We were playing really well, and obviously we found ourselves into a semi-final. So,
you look at yourself in the situation, taking it back to what we were talking about 10 minutes ago about Gareth Bale and stuff, and not having that standout superstar for the Wales squad now. Not just what his work would be on the ball, but quite often you'd have to put two men on him, especially in his pocket.
Yeah.
And then you'd have the chance. So it's why likes of Hal Robson-Kanu was able to shine in Euro 2016. You'd have players like Ramsey and Allen, whatever, who'd be able to occupy opposition players and give the little bit of half a yard of space then.
Yeah, but it's just the fact we had a plan. We knew we had two top players. So we thought, right, how can we get the best out of them? So we put them both into the team behind the striker. We played five at the back because we didn't really have any wide players. And then we decided, like, Kanu, for example, would play up front and work his socks off just to try and, create openings. And he himself never scored many goals for Wales, but obviously when he did score, they were big goals. Yeah. And some of them were, one in particular was spectacular. So it was just a very good team, but we had an idea of how to get the best out of what we've got. And I think Page has struggled to do that in general. He's been relying on those players to give us that bit of magic. And
it's a more rounded squad now, isn't it? It's less five. I mean, when you look at the likes, without any disrespect at all, when you look at the likes of Jazz Richards playing against Belgium and marking Eden Hazard, you look at the squad, you're at a different kind of level now where you're thinking you've got to balance this across the 11 on the pitch.
Yeah, we don't really have any stars now, do we? I mean, you'd probably say Brennan Johnson and Ben Davies obviously are our best two players, but I mean, Brennan hasn't been great for Wales so far, I don't think. I mean, I'll stick up for him because obviously a lot of his appearances have been from the bench, and obviously until the last year he wasn't, I would say someone you'd like to consider starting. But I think in that time, there haven't been, too many standout moments for him. I think it will come, but maybe we need to find out how to get the best out of him, for example. So, yeah, it's just, I think this is where it does come in, where a better manager would maybe know what they were doing. But look, we can talk about this forever, can't we? Because they've not decided to make a change. We're stuck with it. And if we don't qualify and we're not living the dream in Germany, which is one of the best countries to host a tournament, I'm going to be a very angry man. People are going to get it.
It wouldn't be the first.
That was an interesting one there, Steve. You were saying, I had this conversation with a few mates the other day. This is the first time since when that we haven't had proper stars in the team. you had Bale and Ramsey for so long, Giggs before that, and
we've got no one playing in the Champions League, for example, have we?
Yeah, exactly. Before that, you always had Sparky, Neville Southall, Rush, these boys, and those teams never qualified. But this is the first time in all of our lifetimes probably that we haven't had a genuine global superstar in the team.
Yeah, we've been quite lucky because we're not a big country, as everyone knows, but we have produced some unbelievable players, really. Far more than you would think.
The two best left-sided players in probably British history, both for Wales.
Yeah, you think so. And like you said, Neville Southall was mentioned just then. He was, if not the best, one of the best at the time. And I mean, Ian Rush is Liverpool's record goal scorer. There's been so many top players that Wales have produced. But I mean, at the moment, we've got good players, I think. But we don't have that star, do we? I think that's definitely fair to say. But we're not a bad side either. I think we're definitely good enough to
qualify,
go to this tournament. We're not good enough to go to a World Cup now, but yeah, we'll soon find out, I suppose. But we haven't been good enough to get through this group. That's the disappointing thing. But we've still got a chance. That's We'll say this. It wouldn't be the first time we've recorded a podcast and then there's been news about an hour after we finished recording and it's completely made the podcast pointless. Yeah. Paige was to have it.
Nice one.
Yeah. He's lucky. He's travelling to Switzerland for this draw tomorrow. So if he gets sacked before that draw, I would be shell shocked. We'd have to be levels.
Imagine he was still there.
Yeah,
it'd be like Weedling when Bradley was in.
I'm trying to think. There must be one or two clubs that would probably go down that route, but we wouldn't. I mean, Turkey sacked their manager in the summer, didn't they?
Yeah.
They were top of the group at that point, and they lost to someone in the friendly, and they booted him out.
Got to make those decisions, haven't they?
It's just brutal, and I do wish we obviously had the balls to make a decision like that, but we didn't.
Yeah, well, there's likenesses, I suppose, when you look at the Swans. If we move on to that now, because we started the early season in dreadful form, Mitch, and there was a lot of talk, no wins in the first 7, and you're thinking, this guy might leave the club just as soon as he's arrived.
Yeah, I was really worried at the start, and I think I spoke to you around about in the middle of that run, it might have been, or towards the back end of it, and I remember that the Bristol City performance was just abysmal. Even when they went 1-0 up, I thought, what is going on? It was terrible, and then Cardiff was somehow even worse, I think, in some ways.
I think we must have spoken just before the Cardiff game, was it?
Yeah, I remember we did have a chat about that, yeah.
And that was the thing, we were just looking and thinking, what on earth? It was terrible, wasn't it? And you start thinking then, going into the international break, they would have had the question of, do we make a change? And I think they got not lucky, but they had a nice run of winnable fixtures. Sheffield Wednesday were just dross at the moment. QPR a bit of a mess and unlucky not to win there. And Millwall, they sacked their manager not too long after winning there, so he turned things around a little bit, but it seems like I wouldn't say they're back in that mode because they've definitely improved, but I'm just still not fully convinced in terms of what the plan and the style is. And this comes back to what we were chatting about with, Rob Page and not having stars. And it means you have to have a clear and obvious plan. Russell Martin, whether people liked him or not, and I know fans were divided on him at Swansea, but you always knew what he was trying to do. So you could at least say, well, okay, cool. If it's not working, maybe he was a bit too stubborn at times, but he believed in it and he had a plan. But, I'm just not fully sure on what Swans are trying to do at the moment. And I think maybe that's probably why you're getting so much inconsistency. Obviously, the massive changes over the summer doesn't help either, as everyone at the club will keep telling you. But, I don't know what you think, boys, because like you say, you're there every single week. And, what is a Michael Duff Swansea team, do you reckon?
It's hard to say. I mean, one problem we've definitely got, though, I would say, is that obviously when we were talking there about Bristol City and Cardiff at that point, we were still playing 5 at the back. And it just felt as if it was desperation from Duff, really, then to change it to a back 4. And it did work initially. But, I mean, we're unbalanced again, really, now, because obviously we didn't sign it. Well, we signed one winger in the summer, and obviously now he's out for the season, Janelli. So we've sort of shoehorning people into the team now. Cullen has played out wide right for much of the season. Obviously, Lowe's played on the left. That's fine. But yeah, we're playing now in a way where obviously we didn't intend to play this way, but we're short of wide players. So you're never going to be as good as maybe you'd like to be because of that. And I mean, I'm looking and thinking Cullen's taken some stick, which, I think he is limited out wide, but at the same time, I think he's doing his best. And we don't really have anybody else. I mean, Yates hasn't been great up front, but he's not had much service. So you're thinking, could you change that and put Cullen up top maybe? But then who goes out wide? It is a bit of an issue really, because like I say, we were going to play with 5 at the back, so that hasn't helped us. But we haven't played great, I think, in a lot of games. I mean, recently the last time we recorded was after the Sunderland game, and we agreed, didn't we? I think myself and Matt, that it was 10. With 10 men, we were actually better, weren't we?
Oh, so
than with 11. They were going to beat us with 11, though, I would have thought. They carved us open loads of times. So, it's not been brilliant, has it, to say the least?
The Ipswich game the other day started very well, good control, good. And this is where I get confused. I know Duff's kind of I guess a little, not quite the antithesis of Russell Martin, but not a million miles away from it, because Russell Martin didn't care about what the opposition did. He had his way. He was going to play that way, and it was just completely, tunnel vision on that. And Michael Duff has gone the other way and said he's going to do all his work really on off the ball and kind of make sure the team is more solid off the ball, make sure they can win it back quickly and stuff. But then you see we're not putting together too many good passages of play when we do have it, and the percentage of possession has dropped, and you see in the passes are getting less, and it's almost as if we're more concerned with, right, they have the ball, now how do we get it back? And when we get it, we're not 100% sure what we've got in mind ourselves then. And also we talked about the formation issue. I'm a massive advocate of forward the back, and I hope we stay with it, but we need to make sure we have the players to play if we're going to play the 3 out wide, because you touched on it. Yates doesn't suit that lone striker role for me at all. He looks like a lost sheep a lot of the time. And people will say, oh, look at the yards he's running. Look how, he's working hard. That's fine. He's chasing shadows. He's not doing a lot. He's just running himself into the ground, feeding off scraps. So, it does appear to be a lot more work off the ball. And then you end up with the Ipswich situation then, where you take the lead, but as soon as Ipswich come back at us, they carve us open 5 or 6 times.
It's quite a funny game, really. I mean, there's a lot of goals in it, obviously, but we've started really well, scored a nice goal with a header.
We didn't know how to control that then, did we?
No, but I suppose the one thing I will say for us, I think we're slightly unlucky, where Ipswich hadn't done much, then they've just scored a worldie, and it has turned the game.
Yeah.
So I'll give them, I do think that can happen on occasions, but then they got in so many times, didn't they?
Yeah.
The amount of chances because I didn't think Ipswich were, possession-wise and stuff like that, they didn't really dominate in the way I thought a side in their position in the league would have. But my God, did they create good chances? And I was thinking,
they should have scored 4 by half time.
They should have been out of sight, shouldn't they?
They're a clinical side, aren't they? I think they've scored in, is it something like 37, 38 games running? It's they're always a threat, aren't they? That's the thing. And I know what you mean in terms of style, Steve. It's not like a Leicester or a Burnley last year or something like that. It is different, isn't it? But strange game. I wasn't there, obviously, but to take the lead so early was, it must have been sort of a bit of a confidence booster, but they sort of kind of just got blown away with 2 really quick goals, didn't they? And I don't know if that sort of sapped the confidence and the energy and stuff. And then obviously Cullen getting the red card in the second half didn't help either. But that was just after the 3rd goal, wasn't it? So
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Ipswich are a good side. I think they're certainly contenders to go up, maybe even automatically if they can keep this up. But so I wouldn't be overly concerned with that kind of game. But it was just some of the other ones, even since the bad run at the start and the good run that followed that. I mean, there's just been a lot of performances where it's just a little bit flat, and you just want to see a little bit more, and maybe it'll come. And I think they want to be really busy in the transfer window in January, don't they? I'd be surprised if they don't make a couple of signings at least, maybe 2 or 3. Especially with the injuries, you're talking long-term ones with Janelli, as you already mentioned, and Joe Allen, Nathan Wood as well, Azim Abdullahi, who was just coming in. So, I think they will be active, and they'll try and solve some of those problems that you've already touched on, particularly like the wide thing, because I agree with you. I don't like Cullen playing out wide. It's not his position. Yates, obviously, he's limited, I think. But he's also not had proper service and the help that he's maybe had in other clubs and in other styles, particularly like Blackpool, where they play to his strengths a lot more. So, yeah, I think that'll be a work in progress. And I'd like to think that they'd be better after January, as long as they can get the business done, which by all accounts they should be fine to do, because, there is a bit of money there, by all accounts, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, my frustration really is that in terms of the bigger picture, that all they had to do last year was give a couple of quid to Martin, and surely would have ended up in the playoffs. Whereas this year now, they have decided to back, but obviously we've sold a few, and they've done it in the wrong year, really. But how do you assess the squad? Because there were some weaknesses last year, as everybody knows. I mean, the goalkeeper being an obvious one, obviously right back.
We don't manage to get through a podcast without mentioning that, man. I don't think we've done it yet this season.
No, we don't. But yeah, it's an obvious weakness, isn't it? As I've said many times, right back was a weakness. Yeah. That obviously has improved and stuff like that. But obviously we've lost Ryan Manning. I don't think Tyman's as good as him personally. I'm not criticising him. I still think he's a decent player. Obviously, we've lost Perot, who could be quiet on occasions, but he's good for 20 goals. I mean, what do you make of us in general? Because to me, it looks as if there's more depth and stuff like that. But I don't know if are we as good? We're probably sort of similar in that sense, I guess. But then we're stronger in different positions and we've got weaker in others.
Yeah, it's hard to say, isn't it? And I mean, put Carl Rushworth into that team last year, and I think there's a massive improvement. I agree with you on that. But then again, it comes down to the style, and Rushworth's not really been asked to do to play in the way that Andy Fisher was last year, or even Stephen Bender, in fairness, because let's be honest, they Swans really changed their game when was it that QPR game? Stephen Bender came in and they won 1-0, and it was totally different to what we'd seen under.
The ludicrous goal kick routine was gone.
That was it, yeah. Well, funnily enough, I did a piece on that in the week before, and then they changed the goalkeeper out that weekend. So, yeah, you're welcome, boys.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, but I just remember watching, it was the Stoke game where they had about 5 or 6 goal kicks and they didn't even get out of their own half. And
the Stoke one was, I think we played out and then we lost the ball about 25 yards. The guy had a shot and we're at the bar, and you're just thinking, if that goes in, I guess one of the most abysmal goals to give away, wasn't it?
We kept losing the ball in the same goal kick routine, and you're thinking, they're not learning.
See, this is what happens when Steve mentions Andy Fisher again. It's chaos again.
Up, Mitch. I'm trying to avoid it, but he winds me up.
Literally, in the car on the way to the game last night, he got mentioned numerous times. And it's just, yeah.
He goes down in history. Oh, talking of Fisher, I don't know why this is talking of Fisher, we almost conceded the most comical own goal ever at Ipswich as well, where the ball rolled over Rushworth's foot straight after the goal.
Yeah.
And because he's, all in all, I got an opinion, Mitch, that Rushworth is, if things fall his way, he's got an England cap in him. Because he's got such a bright future, and he's got it all, hasn't he? He's got his great shot stopper, he commands his area, his distribution is great with both feet. He looks like he could be the real deal. And when you consider some of the England goalkeepers and where they've come from, and you think, well, Rushworth could follow in that track if he gets the right moves, and see what happens with Brighton. But he's a top keeper, isn't he?
He is, yeah, and it reminds me a lot of Freddie Woodman in terms of, Premier League goalkeeper coming down to the Championship and instantly being made number one. And you can see the quality there, can't you? And obviously he's worked with Martin Margetson and stuff as well. So he's clearly going to be one for the future, maybe even at Brighton if it works out for him there. But yeah, I just think, and coming back to your sort of original point on the squad, I really like Josh Key. I think he's been a miss.
Yeah.
Ashby, you can see that there's quality in there. He's not quite shown it yet, but I just get the impression that it might not even be with Swansea. It always happens with loans. Sometimes someone will have a bad loan, but there's a good player in there.
Oh, I'm thinking of Victor Gyökeres as you were talking about that then.
Oh god, yeah. I think I was there for his who did they play in the FA Cup? Was it Stevenage? He scored against his first goal, and he left the week after, didn't he?
Yeah, and then you see whatever it was last month, where I know it was that game that didn't get played in but scored that unbelievable goal away to Belgium, didn't he? And you're thinking, is this the same player?
No, it was ridiculous. But that's the thing, these things happen with loan players, but yeah, I just think the squad, they've addressed the problem areas, but then they have been robbed of Ginnelly. I think he was going to have he'd had a promising start, didn't he? That goal in the Carabao Cup was at Northampton, wasn't it? Scoring at QPR, and he just had something different that they didn't have. So I think they're going to be things that they kind of really have to look at addressing in January, aren't they?
They're lucky just before he went off against Sunderland, he won the penalty, didn't he? And you think Sheffield Wednesday, sorry, yeah. But you look at that and you think he looked like he was starting because he was probably the best player on the pitch in the opening 20-25 minutes there, because we were using him as an out ball, and he was. I know Sheffield Wednesday it was, but he was a very bright spark for us. So
Yeah.
You can mention number 11 if you want. I mean, this is the perfect time to mention it.
Yeah, I don't know if we've ever told you about this, Mitch, but the number 11 is a cursed shirt.
Yeah.
Like, and it's, as soon as he signed, I said this, and it's happened again. Like, you just think they need to be made aware of this, and yeah, that number needs to be retired. I've never seen anything like it.
If you want to do another big favour to us boys, Mitch, you want to write an article on the number 11 of Swansea City to get it up there.
Yeah,
we'll give you all the facts, because
it might even have been. Might have been you boys, I can't remember, but I've definitely had this conversation. I'm sure it was in the office. I'm going back a few years now, because I'm trying to. I definitely haven't written about it, but I've had the conversation of it before. But yeah, it's just you feel for him as well, because it's a horrible injury as well. He's going to be out for so long. So to get a championship move would have been great for him. But it is what it is. That's football, and like I said, I think that's why they've really got to make sure they get 2 or 3 quality additions in January, because after another little good run, it's kind of petered out a little bit, and they're just in that bottom half, middle of the pack sort of malaise, and it just feels like there's nothing to look forward to really. So, but a couple of wins.
I'm honestly thinking to myself, right, that we're going to probably stay in this area certainly until the new year, maybe because of the lack of options in certain positions. And if I'm honest, I'm looking at the season and thinking we've got Cardiff at home the week before the Wales playoffs, and that does genuinely seem like the key point of the season, where we play Cardiff and then Wales have got those games.
I'm already dreading that game.
Yeah, well, Ramsey be fit for that now. We watch.
It's terrifying. I think with the situation as it is at the moment, the problem we've got, and sure you're not alien to this either, Mitch, is whenever Swans come unstuck and go on a little bit of a bad spell, which they've had plenty of already this season, there's loads of rumours coming out from the club, and there's loads of whispers and this and that's going on in the training field, and he's living in Cheltenham, yada yada. It's not, and these voices from apparently was within the club. It almost feels like even if we go and win 3 and 4 games, he's not going to win those people around, the ones who aren't his biggest fans within the club and indeed outside of that. And it feels like we're just waiting for the inevitable moment where he's no longer a Swansea City manager, really. It doesn't feel like this is ever going to be a turnaround and become a Swansea City hero. Is that just me, or do you get that vibe as well?
Yeah, I know what you mean, and I think the reason I kind of think that was his comments in terms of I'm not going to celebrate wins like we won the World Cup, and I think some of it might have been digs at the previous regime, who knows? But in the fact that he was doing that, and then see him at Plymouth away giving 3 fist bumps, fans are loving it. I'm like, oh, okay, you changed your tune now, which is quite ironic. But at the end of the day, building a rapport with fans is quite a good thing to do. I think it's pretty daft not to do it, in my opinion. So. Russell Martin did have that connection with fans. I found, he'd go over to them before the game on away days and all that sort of stuff. And I remember asking him about when he used to do it at Cardiff, he'd get booed when he walked on, and he sort of revelled in all that stuff, didn't he? Which Michael Duff's obviously taken a different approach, and it's not really his thing. But yes, I think that's kind of part of the thing where what you're trying to allude to, I think there, Matt, in terms of him not having this connection or like a feeling of he's going to be the guy to take us to the Premier League. And bear in mind, we've not seen enough results wise to think that anyway yet, but a few wins here and there, and if the squad does improve in January, then people might change the tune and think, actually, because he had slow starts at Barnsley and Cheltenham and did really well with both, didn't he? So
he's a very different character as well, isn't he? When you think of the managers that have done really well, and the kind of PR dreams, if you like, when you look at the likes of Roberto Martinez, Brendan Rodgers, Russell Martin, as you just touched on there, you get a little bit more leeway with a couple of bad results. Well, Russell Martin, 3 wins in 23 last year is a perfect example.
But also, I think they're trying to play in a certain way, isn't it? If you know what I mean, and they can see what you're trying to do, and sometimes it depends on your circumstances. Now, I think there'd be more sympathy for Duff if he hadn't had the backing that he'd had as well, wouldn't it? I mean, it does
spent a lot.
You've spent a lot, brought a lot in. I know that could be a bit of a transition and stuff like that, but I mean, we're comparing it, aren't we, to where the previous regime, it was 1 out, 1 in at best. And obviously in January, it was 5 out, none in. And that makes it far trickier then, doesn't it? So it might feel as if Duff's getting less sympathy because you're comparing it to the last regime and going, well, the last guy had no backing and got us 10th, well, this guy's has had a load of players in and went currently 17th, and it might seem harsh on the face of it. But it's when you put everything together sometimes. And I think one of the things I don't like is the amount of aimless long balls I keep seeing. And I just think, well, that's just not what we do. I mean, you shouldn't really do that in a situation where if you're hanging on at the end and you've got to get rid of it. I mean, I don't like to see us just aimlessly lump it. I don't mind a pass, a long pass going forward if there's an idea of trying to pick someone out with it. But yeah, I mean, that's one thing in particular I don't like. But I mean, what interests me now is that we've got quite a big week coming up. We're home to Hull. We're away to Leeds, which is going to be very tough, I would have thought. And then we're home to Huddersfield. Now, as things stand, we've had 5 wins in 16. Now, I think that if we don't get a win against Hull Saturday, there's going to be a bit of pressure here because, like I said, it'll probably go then. It'll be 5 and 17. It'll probably be 5 and 18, surely, because I don't see us winning the Leeds. And then you look at that Huddersfield game. They're a team that are poor. They're down the bottom. I mean, the manager could be under real pressure then. I mean, do you think that could be the case, Mitch?
Yeah, most probably, because that was the downside with you look at Russell Martin. Both certainly his first season, it was a slow start in terms of results and even performances. That you could see what he was doing, but it took time, didn't it? Whereas this season, I find you couldn't see what he was doing. Performances were bad, and results were even worse. So I think he's already sort of fighting that kind of battle, and things have steadied out, but naturally it means you're going to be under pressure when you have any kind of bad run because what they're looking behind them at the moment, probably in terms of the grand scheme of the championship table. And I think we're going to be fair to say there's enough poor teams, and Sheffield Wednesday have been awful, and a couple of others not been great, to not have to worry about that in the long term in terms of the relegation zone. But as Steve said, a couple of tough games in there, and if you suddenly drop into 20th, 21st and you're hovering above it going into the January window, well, are the club going to say you're the man to spend this money in January, or do you make the change then? So, this November, December time is crucial because that has to factor into your thinking as well, doesn't it? You can't go and back a manager in January, then think, at the end of January, we've been terrible and we're going to have to get rid of him because, the players want to know who am I playing for and how is it going to work,
Yeah, definitely. What do you think? Do you think he could be? Is there pressure this weekend?
I think, to be honest, as I was saying a few minutes ago, I think every game is pressure for him now because I don't see that he's going to be able to win over a large section at the Swans. So every game is. We've talked so often on this podcast of style versus substance, and if you go for substance, then you better make sure you get it, because if you go for style and you don't get the result, people will appreciate what they see. But if you go for substance and you just go in to grind out results and then you don't get the result, then you've got nothing else to hang your hat on. And that was one of my big gripes with Cooper, as you know, from a few years ago, was kind of like we were just trying to play for those 1-0s. And he was remarkably successful at it. But then you look at it, and every time we'd lost a couple on the bounce. And I mean, thank God we were in lockdown because I was losing my head. I was just thinking.
I don't think you'd have been the only one. That's the thing. It's an interesting dynamic, that whole thing, isn't it? Of you're in lockdown and there's no
we'd have
crowd.
been pulled off a few times.
Oh, I think so. Even after 1 or 2 wins, there would have been murmurings, I think, wouldn't it? You know what it's like down here. So
yeah,
I'm sure I remember in John Hollands' era that when we won the league, there was a lot of games where the crowd were not happy. I remember
we used to whistle for full time after about 65 minutes there because we'd score one. We'd only ever score one.
Yeah.
And we just had Matthew Bum, Jason Smith just lumping it away.
Yeah. Mitch, for a bit of context, we won the league, which is now Leeds.
Yeah.
John Hollands was manager. We scored 51 goals to win the league, which is quite remarkable. So you can imagine it was not easy on the eye.
Incredible defence.
It is bonkers. And then you look at like Paulo Sousa and stuff, the way that he played, and yet he was it 7th? Just the
7th. 40 goals that was to get 7th.
Exactly.
The one thing you hated about that is he left Trundle on the bench so often.
Well,
he's got the best goals for the ratio in the league.
Trundle scored 5 goals from 2 starts and a number of sub appearances. Gorka Pintado scored 2 goals from 20 starts. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that maybe he might be making the bad call there.
You know what I'm going to tell you?
Well, feed the ball.
Feed the ball.
No, you feed him, he won't score.
Oh, but Paulo Sousa was another one who wasn't one for necessarily artistry in terms of what he was looking for in a footballer. He was looking for that kind of run in the yard.
Sousa liked passing, but then I think it's a bit of a Portuguese thing. They like a bit of a lump up front. Even Mourinho's like that, isn't he? He's always loved a Drogba, isn't he, or something like that. And so obviously then Sousa brought in Ad Pintado, and then he brought in Shefi Cucci, didn't he?
Yeah.
Just those type of of players they like in strikers?
Probably missed the best chance I've seen for a Swansea City player in my life, possibly.
Oh, Chef Kikuchi, yeah, definitely.
Be honest,
we had some
did you think
went over 10 strikers, mind?
Yeah, he did. Rogers couldn't get the right one, could he? Until Barini came in the year he went up, and then obviously signed Danny Graham, so that was fine.
But ultimately, you go back to that very argument where Sousa was a more substance manager. He wasn't. He was possession based, but he was defensive, wasn't it? And he showed up the defence a lot. And Rogers was style, albeit they come a lot with substance as well. But you have that if you can enjoy watching it. Very much like Potter's year when we just got relegated. We just seen the world fall apart. We let 20 odd players leave off for peanuts at the end of the season. We were looking like we could go to the wall, Mitch, and then in comes the youth team basically to carry this squad through. And by and large, it was just a really fun season to watch players, dazzle and show with little fear.
Yeah, I'm glad you used the word fun, because I'll be honest, that was my first full season covering them full time. I'd done them part time for years before it with Wales Online, but I genuinely, that's the second half. Remember, was it they won 5 out of 6 or something? And you go into the Liberty, the .com, and the you were buzzing for the games, like DJ, Ollie McBurney, Roden, these boys that were just outstanding, and even like Matt Grimes and Jay Fulton, I that are still there now. And it was genuinely fun to watch, and the style was brilliant. And in the end, I think we were talking about the playoff picture towards the end, and I think they were a good few points off it in the end and finished 10th, didn't they? But it was just, what a season that was. Just so fun to watch.
I always look back on that season as being like not that I'm criticising them here, the frustration that we didn't get one more year of it, because I think we'd have done really well. There weren't many weaknesses, but we only had a small squad. But obviously it started a bit slow, which it would, because it's a transition. Because Dan James being the best example. He did grow from a boy into a man during that season. Roden had barely played any games. McBurney had played a few previously. But it just felt like those players then were at the point where obviously they were really good. A few of them got moves off the back of it. If we could have just kept that for another season, we'd have done really well, I think. But obviously finances dictate that was never going to happen. And unfortunately, Potter went to Brighton, and that was that, wasn't it? But there was that was an enjoyable season, wasn't it? And I think you can, even though we didn't get into the playoffs, I think sometimes that just sort of shows we're still talking fondly about that.
Someone like Bursan Salina as well, who was a bit of a enigma out there with him, but he had such a good year under Potter, wasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. It's a funny one sometimes that you can talk about it with World Cup sometimes. The Dutch teams of the 70s, they get spoken about more fondly than some others, for example. So, it's a funny one, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like you said there. You look at because of the style they played, and that's why you're still talking about it. Steve Cooper got Swans to the playoffs twice, and people don't really reference the sort of that team and the era. And maybe it's because there was a lot of loan players, and they didn't really stay on. Whereas the academy boys coming through, they'd had success under Gary Richards and Cam Toshak before being given the chance under Graham Potter with the first team. So. Yeah, it's one that we'll always look back on fondly, even though there was no sort of real success, if you want to quantify it in that sort of term, which comes back to the style thing, isn't it? It's always a big thing at the club, and fans just want to see good, entertaining football, don't they? And, I wouldn't say you can pass on success and achievements, but I think that season did kind of prove, especially with the backdrop of just coming out of the Premier League, that, if it was good to watch and you could see progress, people would sit back and say, okay, no problem, I can accept this.
I think with what we've seen over the last 2 years as well, Steve, was we employed possibly the most extreme version of that style manager. Almost, I think so. I'm going to say almost too far, to the point where you were just thinking, can we have a little bit of sense here? I don't want us to spend any great length of time looking at the opposition or anything like that, but can we have an idea of what happens when the opposition press high or something like that, so we don't constantly just keep passing short? We have a little bit of a plan B. Yeah,
well, we'd always say, when the previous managers that were successful, they wouldn't employ that goal kick routine.
No.
It was never 5 at the back and getting caught out. And we would always ship a few goals, but under Martinez, we did ship a few, didn't we? But it was pacey wide players, a lot of it wasn't it? We would dominate the ball, but then we would take risks as well to
One thing we said a lot last year and the year before was our defensive players were the most creative on the pitch, and our attacking players then, when we got up there, were kind of more reserved and trying to pass it. But our defenders were the ones who were taking risk. And you're thinking this almost feels
in reverse
backwards to what we normally expect to see. But there's probably, Mitch, there's a I wouldn't say a happy medium between the two, because it's got to be a lot further towards Russell Martin. But there's elements of it where you say, if you just had a slightly less extreme version of it, I think everyone's looking for it though, aren't they? They're looking for the successful style which entertains fans as well. But Swansea have had a blueprint for it over the years. And if it isn't to be with Michael Duff, I think the new owners would you hope they'd have an idea, or the people there would know what sort of manager they want to go for next?
Yeah, I mean, succession planning is a massive part. And we were talking about it with Noel Mooney and Rob Page, and it's the same at club level, probably more so because it's more volatile, isn't it? And you're playing so much more often, more often. So they've obviously got this idea. They understand that there is this demand for that type of football, possession based, attacking, energy, excitement, that sort of thing. And I know that can be a bit of an ideal, and it's what everybody wants in theory. But I think certainly Michael Duff, he's kind of looked at the last 2 seasons and said, yes, there was a lot of good stuff, but we weren't doing some of the simpler stuff right. And he's tried to find more of a balance, hasn't he? And
yeah,
I don't think he's got it yet, but you can certainly see that that's what he's trying to do. And but in terms of Russell Martin, is that when his style works, it's unbelievable. As you saw in the Derby games, or some of the performances and some of the goals, you'd watch them back and it was just unbelievable to watch. But naturally, it came with the caveats of disasters at the back, didn't it? So it's just about finding that balance, isn't it? And that's the toughest thing, especially when you change your entire squad. Was it 13 players in the summer and stuff? So, and a good chunk of them go and get injured early on. So he deserves time. Russell Martin did get a lot of time, in fairness, and rightly so. He should. But I think Michael Duff certainly needs until January and maybe mould the squad a little bit more. It's just whether he gets that time, and that's where you just need to pick up some wins between now and Christmas, don't you?
Final thoughts? Will he be in the job when the January transfer window opens?
I think he probably will be. But things can turn quickly, can't they? We know what it's like in this division. There's a lot of games between now and
Christmas period comes up. It's crazy.
This is it. We know we got, as we've alluded to, 3 games this week now coming up, and I think in mid-December we're in the same boat. I think we got Stoke and a midweek away from home, so that's another one there. And then obviously, as you say, at Christmas,
all these bloody international breaks. It is.
Yeah. Well, we don't have one for a while now, so don't worry. You won't have to see Rob Page's head for a little while.
It can't be soon enough, mate.
Well, I did joke to my mates the other day that him and Bob Bradley would be a great right said Fred.
Oh.
But
boys, now, come on.
Well,
what about you, Mitch? Do you think, on the balance of probability, when the January transfer window opens, Michael Duff will be the Swans manager?
Yeah, I think so. Look, it's not been brilliant so far. There's been enough to suggest that give him time, let him mould the squad a little bit more, because he's only had a couple of months and one window. So if he is going to get the backing in January, which I think Andy Coleman's publicly said that that's what they're planning to do. Then he's going to have a better chance of getting more of what he wants. And it might be a bit of a dead rubber season, but if you then go into next summer and have a better idea of what you're doing, then second season you'd like to think that they can go on and improve. So, and you're not going to get that if you go and chop and change it. But I don't think they need to change it unless things were terribly bad, which they just aren't. It's not been great, but it's not been terrible aside from the sort of opening few weeks, which to an extent you could forgive because it was all new and the big turnover. But they did address it, and since that start, it's been, on the whole, it's been okay. It's been mid-table, isn't it? Let's be honest. So no, I think he'll still be there. No issues there, I think.
Yeah. Well, I haven't really got a lot to say, but we mentioned about Hull a little bit earlier on, Steve, and the fact that he might need a win in the next couple, because Leeds after that is, you'd imagine we'd be up against it there. But before we end the pod, I do tend to try and end now on a bit of a positive spin, mainly because a lot of them aren't the greatest in the whole length of it. So can you give us something? I'll come to you, Mitch, as well. So you've got a couple of minutes to think about it. I'm chucking this on Steve. You should expect it by now. For some nugget of positivity before we close the pod.
Our mate John always talks about law of averages, and we must be due a home win because there's not been many of them. Yeah. So, I do think that, I'm not sure we'll win Saturday. I do think we'll beat Huddersfield at home. they've got a feeling Saturday might be a draw. But look, if we get 4 points from the next 3, it's not terrible. That's not going to put you in.
That's what we had from the last 3.
Yeah, I think that might happen. But it would look. I think at home we've not been great, have we? We've got to. And if we don't win one of these 2 at home, it would be a really bad record. There,
we've got to keep this positive, by the way.
So look, I do think we will win one of them. I'm not sure it'll be Saturday. I think Hull are actually quite a decent team. I think Ian Rossini is a decent manager. They've got some good players. I mean, they signed Philogene, didn't they? Who was a rare Cardiff bright spot last season. So he's there. I think it'll be a challenging one. I think, but I think we'll beat Huddersfield. So, I'm assuming we won't do a pod next week because there's that midweek game. But yeah, I think we'll take 4 points from the next 3. And if, when you're in 17th, that's not a bad return, is it? So that's my positive.
That's your positive. Have you had a little think, Mitch? Have you come up with any bright sparks for me to end the pod on with a smile?
Yeah, I'm glad you gave me a bit of thinking time because I had to try and figure something out. But I'm going to go a little bit left field here and say Charlie Patino coming back because he missed the last game through suspension and they've had the time off. I think that little break and the breather will have done him the world of good because he's a quality, but he's fantastic, isn't he? You've both seen. And I just feel that, he's not been completing full games and I don't think we've seen the best of him yet, even though we have seen some good moments. I think that'll do him the world of good and I'm backing him to sort of come back in and really make an impact on Saturday and hopefully for weeks and months to come. But yeah, we'll the Patino show on Saturday. You heard it here first.
Nice. Let's not fall in love with a lone player. We say it every season.
Sorry, boys.
But I already have with the goalkeeper. Yeah. I think that's partly because of the hate you had from his predecessor, to be honest. But no,
it's done no harm.
No, absolutely. Mitch, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on to the pod and delighting us again.
No, thanks very much for having me, boys. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Steve. It's been great. We won't do one next week now because, like you say, we've got the Wednesday night game against Leeds. But after the Huddersfield game, then we'll come back. And, 4 points is the target. Anything more is a bonus, no?
Well, I think 6 is the target because we've got 2 home games. But, we've got to aim a bit higher. But, look, if we get 4, that's reasonable. We'll see. If we don't get 4, I think we should be disappointed. That's not great.
Yeah. But from myself, Steve, and our special guest, Ian Mitchelmore, thank you so much for listening, and we'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.